Picture this, it's 2025 and I'm starting my gaming backlog from scratch. No more old games waiting to be played, just a fresh new start. If I could do this all over again, trust me, I'd do things differently. You know the drill, you buy games, add them to your backlog and tell yourself, I'll get to them eventually. But let's be honest, for most of us, that eventually never really comes. Over time, your list grows, the pressure builds, and suddenly you're stuck in the endless loop of guilt, overwhelmed by too many options. You're not playing games anymore. You're just deciding what to play, and that's where I went wrong. But in 2025, I'd approach it totally different. First thing I'd do is get picky. No more impulse buys, only games I truly want to play. Second, I'll set realistic goals. No more trying to conquer everything at once. One game at a time, and I'd actually enjoy it. So in today's video, I wanted to talk about what I would be doing if I were to start my backlog in 2025 from scratch. So here are 5 practical tips that will help you out to get started in 2025, or if you've started already in your backlog, these practical tips will teach you how to get through the year and the years to come as you progress through your backlog. So without further ado, let's get into the intro. The first thing that I would do, I would stop buying games just because they are on sale. This is one of the biggest mistakes I made early on. Grab games just because they were cheap. Sales are great, but they trick you into buying games you might never actually play. It's like stocking your fridge with food you'll never eat. It just sits there until it expires. Not to mention that we deal a lot with the problem of bundles. It definitely can ramp up your build-up of your backlog in a way that is unmanageable. And I know I had that issue from the very get-go when I started building up my wish list and eventually buying as much as I could from these websites that you could literally get a few couple of games for a couple of pennies, and it was a never-ending cycle that could actually lead you to have a massive backlog that it will become eventually unmanageable. So what would I do instead? Before buying games, I'd ask myself, would I play this right now? If I bought it, and if the answer is no, then I'll skip it. And if I really want it, I would add it first to my wish list instead of buying it. And then I would ask myself for a couple of weeks as I continue to think about it, if I really wanted to buy the game and if the pressure would be there, and I would decide that yes, I want to play the game straight up, I would decide to go and buy it. Otherwise, I would think it would become an unnecessary thing. Not to mention, another thing that I would do is I would not get every single game from the bundle that I purchased. I would either trade them or give them to my friends or anything like that of a sort, that I would not build up a backlog of games that I thought that I would be interested to try out, or they just look nice and I thought that maybe I can get to them. It is a lie that we constantly tell ourselves when we're working towards building our backlog, and every single week, every single month, we keep on telling ourselves that we will make progress. As we play 1 or 2 games per month, we end up buying more than we necessarily can play, and then we tell ourselves, oh well, it was a sale, it was worth it. And oftentimes we make this great mistake. So I think if I were to start, this would be my number one thing to help me out and stop reducing that backlog. Stop buying, stop going for sales, stop going for Humble Bundle, for Fanatical, for whatever bundle that is out there, and I would be waiting patiently. Sales are constantly on Steam. If you're on Steam, you will be constantly bombarded. Week by week, you will have several sales for the games in your wish list or other games that you're following. It is impossible not to get a game on sale in the next 3 to 6 months. Games that came out today in 3 to 6 months will be on sale. So worrying about that fear of missing out, that you couldn't get the game on that day because because the sale is so enticing. It is a lie that we constantly say to ourselves, and we make that grave mistake by choosing to indulge ourselves in purchasing because it is at 50, at 75, at 90% discount. So that would be my number one thing. My second thing that I would do would prioritize games based on enjoyment, not obligation. One of the biggest traps people fall into is playing games out of guilt instead of excitement. Just because a game is in your backlog doesn't mean you owe it anything. I used to force myself through games just because I bought them even when I wasn't even enjoying them. Not to mention that I took part in websites like Steam Gifts where you would have to partake in these giveaways, you would win the game, and then you would feel obligated that you would have to play a game that you weren't sure that you're actually gonna enjoy. Now, of course, if you're on different platforms, it's another thing, but oftentimes when we spend a lot of money, especially when the game came out, we'd oftentimes tell ourselves that, because I spent $50, $60, $80, since nowadays games are so expensive, we tell ourselves that, I better play it right now as I value my time spent with it, I value the money I put into it, or that if I don't play it right now, I'll not be up to date with other people that are enjoying it right now. So that is one thing that I think I would definitely change, and I'm working on that aspect quite a little bit, and I've been making quite the strides when it comes to that, because new games don't really necessarily excite me as it used to. But still, I have the issue of buying games, not playing them when I buy them because they had a discount, and the never-ending cycle continues. So what I would do instead, I'd focus on what really excites me. If I'm in a mood for an RPG, I'll pick it up and play it. If I want to pick an indie, I'll just go for it. And I've been doing this for quite some time now, especially with my Steam Deck. If I feel like playing something short and sweet, I would just simply go, put that one game up and play it for a couple of hours until I finish it. Then I'll go to something much more longer or whatever I feel the need to play. Backlogs should feel like a buffet of choice, not a checklist of chores. And I can't emphasize enough how important that is for myself to hear this one. Oftentimes we are so focused on getting that backlog lower and lower, but instead we forget to enjoy the games that we have, and we always try to chase the new thing, and we keep on building and building and building, and we neglect that area so much. So that would be my number 2 priority. For my number 3, I would accept that some games just aren't for me. This was a tough lesson for me to learn. Sometimes I'd force myself to finish a game I wasn't enjoying just because I felt that I needed to 100% complete it. Now, if you're not a completionist, this isn't necessarily a problem, but let's say that you pick up a game because your friends ask you to, or a family member asks you to, and you get into it, but the game doesn't click with you, and you feel compelled to play it because your friends or your family ask you to, and you're trying to enjoy it, but it really doesn't stick with you. One of the main things that you should be doing in this kind of case is to acknowledge the fact that some games are just not going to be for you. They're not your type of games. They're not the genre that you enjoy. They might be whatever people are saying, like they're game of the year or they're games that somebody must play, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily a game that is made for you. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of Souls-like games. That doesn't mean I don't acknowledge that they could be for a target audience that I respect, and I think that they can be extremely fun once you get to understand the ropes. I personally don't enjoy as much suffering in games and dying multiple times until I figure out what I need to do. For other people, this is the best thing that it could be in gaming, and that's perfectly fine. So what I would do instead, if a game isn't fun for me for a few hours, I'd simply drop it without any sort of guilt. I wouldn't have to worry about going and pursuing to complete the game just because I want it on a giveaway, or just because some friend of mine told me that, hey, you really need to play Baldur's Gate or Elden Ring or anything like that. There's no rule that says that you have to finish everything you start. You don't have to pursue the way of completionism or trophy hunting. Your time is too valuable to waste on games you're not enjoying, and it is something that I wish I listened more, because it is conflicting a lot with my playstyle of wanting to complete games. And oftentimes the point of playing the game, it can be a game that would turn from, let's say, an 8 out of 10 or maybe even 10 out of 10 down to 7 out of 10 for me, because some games could be more grindy and the achievement seeking and getting those trophies and achievements can really deteriorate your experience as someone who is trying to get those games to 100%. So I would definitely tell myself, my younger self, do not become a completionist. If you value your time and you value enjoying games to the fullest just for what they are, not trying to get those metrics up and trying to be a completionist and to prove to anybody but yourself that you are worth it. For tip number 4, I would set realistic goals. And this I mean by tracking progress in a fun way. One of the best things I ever did was to set small, realistic gaming goals. Instead of saying I need to beat 50 games this year, I'd break it down. 1 game per month or several games per month, it didn't matter. I would sometimes pick one large game and then I would pick a few smaller ones. Or I would pick 1 game from each genre I love. That makes it fun instead of overwhelming. Not to mention that once you have a plan, a set goal, that what you want to do, what kind of games you want to play next, you can leave room for other games that you're in the mood and get yourself in the momentum to keep on playing games and tackling down your backlog bit by bit. And by setting those rules, you'd basically set yourself a box. But because you would want to be able to be flexible, you could break out of that box and pick a game that you wanted to play or something that strikes the mood. You heard about it and you just want to go ahead and try it. It came out, maybe it's an indie, maybe it's something short, it doesn't really matter, but you wanted to break free from the box that you set. But then you would have that ability to go back and tell yourself, hey, I really need to get back to these games, I want to get to experience these games. So you would have a clear goal instead of actually going in a situation like a month or a quarter of the year in which you wouldn't know what exactly you want to play. And as I said, mood strikes differently for me and for other people. Some people like to not plan ahead. I personally think that if you plan ahead by basically saying to yourself, I really want to play a big game, maybe I want to play Red Dead Redemption, or I want to play Cyberpunk, or I want to play Elden Ring, I would have those goals and that would help me to branch out. And whenever I would want to play something different, I could switch it up. I could really adjust the tone, the mood, the type of game. If the game would be hard in my list, I could tackle with something much more casual, much more relaxing, more story based, so that it can help me to get through the hurdle and get through my backlog. So what else I would do? I'd also track progress in a way that motivates me. Some people love spreadsheets, others use apps like How Long to Beat or Backloggers, or my personal favorite, Backlog Assassin, and some just keep a simple list. Whatever works for you, it doesn't really matter. The key is to make it feel rewarding instead of feeling like homework. You don't have to go in over spending time to try to manage everything, as that could go into a whole different direction, and I am oftentimes having that problem where you're over managing things. So not over managing, but having a clear goal of what is your next game, what are you looking forward to, and how you can manage your time in order for you to fit in every single game that you want from that list in the next couple of weeks, months, or quarter. And for tip number 5, play what you want, not what others expect. This one is very, very important because oftentimes we think that we need to do whatever other people are playing. We need to stick up with other people because everybody's playing Helldivers, or everybody's playing Marvel Rivals, or everybody's playing Elden Ring. Instead, what I would do, I would just simply focus on what I feel like playing. If I feel like playing an indie, I would go for an indie right away. If I feel like I want to play an adventure game, I would go for an adventure game. If I really feel like I want to spend countless of hours playing The Sims or City Skyline, or get in Mountain Blade and get myself lost for a couple of hours, I would spend doing that instead of actually listening to what other people are telling you, what is the hottest thing that you can play on the market right now. Just because a game is critically acclaimed or beloved by other gaming communities doesn't mean that is the right game for you or the right game for you right now. I've had times where I pushed myself to play something just because everyone else was loving it, but I wasn't in the right mindset for it. Maybe I wasn't in the mood for a long RPG, or I wasn't vibing with the mechanics of that particular game. game. But instead of setting it aside, I came back later, I forced myself to play it, and that would completely ruin my experience for me. Maybe for you it could be different, but that was personally my experience, and I'm pretty sure some of you might resonate with that. So what I would do instead, I would stop worrying about what other people think I should be playing and just focus on what I want at that particular moment. If I'm not feeling a game right now, I'd come back to it later when I actually want to enjoy it. Games are meant to be fun and not actually an obligation. I think we oftentimes worry way too much about this particular aspect, and what we can do is not worry about what other people think, not worry about what the community thinks, not worry about what Discord says, and not worry about what other recommendations journalists and other content creators are talking about. That is the hottest thing that you should be playing. If you want to play something that is an old game, that's fine, play that game, it's alright. If you want to play something that just came out but it's not very popular, that's fine, go for that. Go for something that makes you happy. Gaming should be enjoyable and should be fun, and not something that should feel like it is an obligation. So yes, if I were to start from scratch in 2025, those are my 5 things I would change, that I think it would really change the way I enjoy playing my games from my backlog. But before I leave this, I want to give you a tip that I wish I've done many years before when I started this journey. My first tip is to try the 2-hour rule. Basically, give myself permission to try a game that I might be interested in for about 2 hours, maybe 2.5. If you're playing on Steam, you have the possibility to grab it, play it, test it out, and if you don't like it, you can ask for a refund. There's no losing that, and it's a great way to test out a game if it clicks for you without spending a lot of money. Well, if you're planning to buy it on day one, obviously you're gonna spend money, but if you don't like it, you simply can refund it, no questions asked. And it is a great way to test out if games are working for you, if they're optimal, if they're clicking for you. And oftentimes a game will click with you in the first couple of hours. If not, then put it aside, don't even consider adding it to your backlog. Also, another thing that I would do, I would play more short games, and I mean games that are between 2 to 10 hours short, that have a good chunk of experience that I can enjoy for a quick session, or either on my Steam Deck or just between whatever I'm doing. I would focus on that and tackle those every now and then and reduce my backlog bit by bit by playing those short ones. Another thing that I would do, I would rotate games by type. By type, I mean by genre. By switching games by genre will keep things always fresh, and you wouldn't burn yourself on a 100 hours RPG or an open world. And not to mention that you could literally switch between short games and long games. That would really help out to really not burn yourself out, and I would definitely do that. I'm doing that and I'm having a blast playing my games, and I highly recommend. This is one of the best methods that I could offer as a tip. I know that I did talk about it in my old backlog videos, and it really helped me out to crush a lot of my backlog because I keep rotating and it always feels fresh. I always learn a new genre, a new indie that tackled with mechanics that were in a different way more interesting. And the last one that I want to give as a hot bonus tip is to make a priority list. Basically pick 5 to 10 games I actually want to play as soon as possible and focus on those instead of looking at my entire backlog or my entire list of games that I have in my library. I would just pick the ones that I really want to play, and I do have a couple of them in my mind, and those I would set as priorities. And even if I would not feel like I want to get into the next game right after, I would at least bring in some other games that really spark my curiosity and my need to want to try something different at that particular moment because the mood strikes. So I would be flexible in that way, but I would keep that 5 to 10 games that I really want to play, and I wouldn't pick them by a sequel or something like that. I would pick them based on the first one that I want to play. So for example, I never played the Yakuza games, I will pick Yakuza 0 and that's it. I wouldn't pick the next 10 other Yakuza games or anything like that. So yeah, that was my thoughts on getting through 2025 and beyond if I were to start fresh. And here's one thing that I learned from this: backlog should work for you, not against you. It's not about owning the most games, it's about actually playing and enjoying them. And if I could do it all over again, I'd focus on that from the start. Because let's be real, How many of us have games sitting in our library that we thought we'd play but never even touch? We don't need more games. We need a better way to approach them. And if you're feeling stuck, maybe now is the perfect time to rethink how you manage your backlog. But now I want to hear from you. If you could restart your backlog right now in 2025, what would you do different? Let's talk in the comment. If you found this video helpful, feel free to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that bell notification so that you'll be notified every time I post something new. Thanks for watching. My name is Vashal, and as always, stay safe, take care, and happy gaming.
Stay safe, have fun, and happy gaming. Stay safe, have fun, and happy gaming.